And I think that's really part of the whole problem. Quite apart from then the physical sort of preparation. You need preparation if you're looking at areas like Beira, low-lying cities. What about the flood defences and so on, the dikes and things like that?
I guess people would say changing climates, much more wet, warm, moisture in the air. Were people expecting? I mean, obviously Mozambique has suffered from cyclones before, a huge one in 2000. Were people expecting something of this magnitude to happen again? And if so, have there been attempts to have early warning systems? Have there been attempts to, stockpile emergency supplies and that kind of thing?
That didn't seem to be evident, and I think the point is that in 2000 there was, or similarly, a lack of preparation, but the response appears to have been much quicker and much more systematic, and most importantly, it came from the region first. So South Africa and Mozambique, civil society organizations, community organizations came in much more quickly than they have this time. So 19 years on from the 2000 cyclone, where there was this great regional response, you seem to be seeing a slower response, and the rest of Mozambique, the capital Maputo, and other areas of the country taken by surprise and slower to react. Ditto in the other two countries that have been hit by the Cyclone Idai, Malawi, which is in the middle of election preparations, and Zimbabwe, which is in the middle of a continuing and worsening economic crisis, have been slower to react. To draw a picture of what was involved, the cyclone Idai that came in across the Indian Ocean hit Madagascar first, so there was something of a warning of how devastating it was going to be. It picked up speed, and then effectively 5 different tropical storms combined to hit Beira, which is the second or third biggest city in Mozambique, all at the same time. And people in Beira have given a description of it, comparing it to a sort of almost like a nuclear explosion. The storms come in, this flood of water, and then these very loud bangs and crashes, and those bangs and crashes are the destruction of people's houses and their livelihoods, and definitely hundreds of people have lost their lives in that first hit. Beira's got a population of about over 500,000. It's low-lying, and again, the issue of preparation is an important one, because there are very few flood defences. So the two big river estuaries that sort of form the Bay of Beira just broke their banks, and then that's where the floods started. And UN workers and the local rescue organizations have spoken in terms of an inland ocean forming to the west of Beira, and only one really serviceable road to access Beira city now from the outside world, which is why the aid and food and medicines have been so slow in getting into Beira.
And I imagine down the line, the impact of all that salt water on farming land will obviously play its part in complicating things. Yeah. It's interesting that you speak of the response in 2000. Mozambique at that point was still putting itself back together after a pretty vicious war, civil war in the 1990s. Yeah. Chissano was the head of state. But nevertheless, the civil society response was quite strong. What can we say about Mozambique, 2 decades after that moment, when, there has been a turnaround in fortunes, very marked around 2008, 8, 9, 10, people were saying, "Oh, this is the Vietnam of Africa in terms of the quickness, the way it's managing to exit its civil war decade." And yet, in the last 8 years, things have really started to come unstuck. Has that, it's too much perhaps to talk about the decay of the state, but it does feel like that the state is not ready for it.
Yeah, I think it's a very important comparison between the response of Mozambique in 2000 and what we're seeing today. And it really is early days to make a clear judgment. And I think what one can best say now is that 2000 set a bar, both for the strength and resilience of the Mozambique people in dealing with this. As you said, this happened, the 2000 flood, cyclone disaster, happened just 8 years after the country had negotiated an exit from the civil war. There's a peace deal between Frelimo, the ruling party, and the rebels of Renamo. They'd had multi-party elections in '94. So and Joaquim Chissano was president, presiding over an attempt to, a sort of South African style attempt to reconcile the nation and so on. So there was a much stronger social and communal morale, it seems, in the society. So even after that crisis, there was a sense, we're going to go on and build together. And then you saw the years, as you said, leading to the financial crisis, 2008. And then there was a sort of upturn in the economy. And there was a lot of positive hopes for Mozambique that it was going to come out of these war years, it's going to develop its gas reserves, and so forth. It was going to become quite a powerhouse.
So this was a moment of economic upturn. What came next?
Well, then we had the election of Armando Guebuza to the presidency in Mozambique, and he came in as an interesting combination of sort of ruling party Stalinist politics and a can-do business spirit. Perhaps in retrospect, he could be...
Sounds great.
It could be compared to the sort of a Putin-esque model, sort of authoritarian politics and a kind of commercial hunger. The economic expansion continued, but also the problems of corruption and opacity and general lack of accountability also continued. And I think they reached their nadir, if you like, in the tuna bond scandal. So Guebuza's expansion certainly helped the Mozambique economy grow. New investors came in, but along with that was this increase in opacity and, quite frankly, corruption and lack of accountability in the way the economy was managed, which companies were coming in and what they were doing in Mozambique. And that sort of reached its nadir with the $2 billion secret loan scandal, which has saddled Mozambique, still one of the poorest countries, with these $2 billion of unpayable loans, apparently for a tuna fishing fleet and a new maritime security system. But in practice, none of those things have any commercial viability. So it's a net loss to the Mozambican people. So 2 years ago, when there were elections, Nyusi took over, Felipe Nyusi, the new president, took over, and he inherited this financial drag on his government. And I think as a result, the country hasn't really recovered from that. And now you've got this attempt by the American authorities, who are peripherally involved in the loan scandal, because the scandal was the money was denominated in US dollars. Credit Credit Suisse Bank, which is quoted on the New York Stock Exchange, was one of the banks involved in the scandal. So was Russia's VTB. So you've got a kind of international financial scandal with the American authorities trying to prosecute some of the key players, including the former finance minister, Manuel Chang. And then they're setting themselves against the Mozambique government under Nyusi, which seems to be trying to shut down the investigation. So the upshot of that is that you've got this continuing lack of accountability in the management of the economic and financial system. And I think that reflects a wider political problem in the country. So against that backdrop, you've got this disaster in Beira, which one UN official has described as probably one of the worst humanitarian catastrophes in the southern hemisphere, which is saying a lot. So it's a real test for the Mozambique government. Will Nyusi's government match up to the pretty outstanding response of the Mozambique government in 2000? And it's a real test for Nyusi.
And a test for the region as well. If South African Air Force pilots were plucking people out of trees in 2000, we've yet to see the South Africans jump into action. It's too easy to make parallels across borders, but certainly the two terms of Zuma have, they've weakened South Africa's own response capability by the introduction of incapable or corrupt elements to run key institutions in South Africa. We've not seen a strong response from SADC. We've seen more response from the European Union than the local regional economic hub. What do you think we can expect from or what should we expect from SADC and from its clear leader, South Africa?
Well, South Africa still has the rescue and maritime and air force capacity to be extremely useful. I mean, it played a key role in 2000. There's no question about it. The South African Air Force was scrambled. Its helicopters, its transport planes and so forth came into Mozambique and saved countless lives. There's no question. The cyclone in 2000 was about the same severity, slightly less maybe, hard to judge these things, than the Cyclone Idai, which is devastating the region today. 440 lives were lost in that episode, and the reason why fewer lives were lost is because of that engagement by the South Africans. It's pretty clear. Now, the sad news is at the moment, I mean, President Nyusi of Mozambique is saying that already he thinks 1,000 people have lost their lives. The UN authorities are still talking about 300-400 deaths, but of course at the moment the emphasis is on saving lives rather than counting the casualties right now.
And I guess there is a weakness in the world, or the global response as well. I mean, you could say that around 2000 was, a relatively high watermark in terms of global response to global problems. Today, Trump is facing off with China and Russia, or not so much Russia, perhaps. And, the UK is bickering with its neighbours. There doesn't seem to be the bandwidth to go beyond very domestic issues.
I think, the increase in nationalism and parochialism across the world is being exposed in these sort of international disasters, where cross-border disasters, I should say, where the international system is called into play. Come in, bring your technical capacity, bring your human capacity to save lives, and certainly the international system has been slowed down. I mean, there's no question about it. The major organizations, the international organizations that are dealing with this sort of disaster, like the World Food Programme, UNICEF and so on, are begging for funds. They're running out of money. And each year around the world, there are these climate-related disasters having increasingly damaging effects on the populations in these countries, and yet the international system is running low on contributions. You hear this from the top levels of the UN. So I think one can say yes about the South African response and the Mozambique response. Their governments have become increasingly sort of nationalist and parochial in their concerns. But I think that's part of a wider pattern where you see, as you pointed out, you see the European Union is more inward looking than it was